Millionaire Marries Obese Woman on a Dare, stunned by her secret triumph. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Rain drizzled over the glittering skyline of Chicago as Ethan Cole stepped out of his black Bentley. Inside the glass tower behind him, a private celebration was underway. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, and the arrogant laughter of men who had never known hunger or heartbreak. Ethan adjusted the cuffs of his suit, his expression unreadable. He had everything: money, success, and fame, but tonight he was simply bored. His college friends surrounded him, their ties loosened, their egos inflated by expensive whiskey. "You say you can buy anything, Ethan," one of them taunted, slamming his glass down. "But can you buy love?" Ethan smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his own glass. "Love?" he echoed. "Love is the cheapest illusion of all." "Prove it," another man laughed. "Marry the next woman who walks through that door. We will all pitch in $1 million each if you do it." "No." The room erupted in drunken applause. Ethan's gaze flicked toward the tall glass doors just as they swung open. A woman stumbled in from the storm, clutching a box of pastries against her chest. Her raincoat was too small, her hair damp, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Her name tag read Lila Bennett, owner of Sweet Haven Bakery, the shop that catered the event. Every head turned. Lila blinked, confused by the sudden silence. The air thickened with mockery and curiosity. Ethan's lips curved into a dangerous smile. He raised his glass, eyes never leaving hers. "I will marry her," he said simply. The room exploded with laughter. Someone shouted, "You cannot be serious." But Ethan only stepped closer, his voice calm, deliberate. 1 month. A contract marriage. She gets a generous payment. I get to prove my point. Lila's eyes widened. "This is a joke, right?" "No," he replied. "It is a business proposal." The laughter grew louder, but for Ethan, the noise faded into nothing. For one strange heartbeat, he saw something in Lila's eyes: dignity, quiet fire, the kind of strength that did not come from money. Lila gripped the pastry box tighter. "People like you think everything has a price," she said softly. "You are wrong." She turned to leave, but the event manager caught her arm. "Miss Bennett, please wait. You have not been paid yet." Ethan's voice followed, smooth and steady. 1 month. Enough to save your bakery, maybe?" She froze. Her bakery, her mother's dream. The loan deadline was in 7 days. Her chest tightened. This was insane, unthinkable. Yet she heard herself whisper, "If I agree, everything is written down?" Ethan nodded once. "Every term, every limit. You will not be touched, not without consent. It is purely business." The crowd leaned in, waiting for the punchline. But there was none. Lila looked down at her trembling hands, then at the man before her, tall, controlled, eyes like winter steel. "All right," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I will do it." Ethan's expression did not change, but a spark flickered behind his calm gaze. "Good," he said. "Then, let us begin." As the storm raged outside, a single flash of lightning illuminated their handshake. It was supposed to be a transaction, a cold deal sealed under neon light. But fate, as it often does, had already written a very different ending. The following morning, Chicago woke to gray skies and the chill of early spring. In a quiet office, overlooking the river, Ethan Cole sat behind a long mahogany table. Across from him, Lila Bennett stared at a contract printed on heavy cream paper. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers trembling slightly. She had hardly slept. Every line of that agreement spelled out the reality of what she had agreed to: a 30-day marriage in exchange for financial compensation that could save her bakery from foreclosure. "You can still walk away," Ethan said evenly. His voice held no emotion, just precision. "No one is forcing you." Lila looked up, meeting his calm gray eyes. "You said this will cover the full amount of my debt?" "Yes," he replied, "and more. You will have freedom after this month. Consider it an investment in your future." She almost laughed at the word. "Investment," she repeated softly. "That is what love means to you?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is not love, Miss Bennett. It is a contract, and contracts end cleanly. He slid a pen toward her. The sound of metal against glass echoed in the quiet room. Lila took a slow breath, reading the final clause. No intimacy without consent. Both parties must appear together at 5 public events. No disclosure to the press. Her signature looked fragile against his bold, decisive strokes. When it was done, Ethan stood and extended his hand. Welcome to our arrangement. That evening, Lila arrived at his penthouse, a place that felt more like a museum than a home. The marble floors reflected the city lights, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne and silence. Ethan's assistant greeted her, offering a folder with her new schedule. "Mrs. Cole," the woman said politely, "your stylist will arrive tomorrow morning. The first event is a charity gala on Friday." The title felt foreign. Mrs. Cole. Lila forced a nod and stepped inside. Ethan stood near the window, city lights outlining his sharp profile. "Your room is down the hall," he said without turning. "You will find everything you need there." "Thank you," she murmured. As she walked past him, the soft rustle of her dress filled the empty space. Ethan's eyes followed her reflection in the glass. She moved carefully, as if afraid to break something that did not belong to her. That night, Lila unpacked her suitcase in the guest room. A small photo of her late mother sat on the dresser. "You would think I have lost my mind, Mom," she whispered, "but I promised I would keep your bakery alive." She ran her thumb over the photo frame, blinking back tears. In the living room, Ethan poured himself a drink, staring at the contract folder. For years, his life had been dictated by deals and signatures, but this one felt different. There was a trace of hesitation he could not explain. The next morning, stylists flooded the penthouse. Fabrics, jewelry, and soft chatter filled the air. Lila stood in front of a mirror as a makeup artist brushed color onto her lips. When she finally stepped out in an elegant navy gown, even the staff fell silent. Ethan looked up from his phone and froze. For the first time, his practiced composure slipped. Lila saw it and smiled faintly. "You said this was business," she said. "So let us make it look convincing." He nodded, offering his arm. "Shall we, Mrs. Cole?" Outside, the flash of cameras already waited. She took a deep breath, slid her hand into his, and stepped into the spotlight. Neither of them realized that the line between contract and connection had already begun to blur. The ballroom of the Meridian Hotel shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Music floated softly through the air as Chicago's elite gathered for the annual charity gala. Every camera turned the moment Ethan Cole entered the room, his hand resting lightly on the arm of his new wife. Lila's navy gown hugged her curves with quiet elegance. Her confidence, though fragile, grew with every flash of light. She had rehearsed her smile all afternoon, but nothing prepared her for the sea of whispers that followed. "Is that her?" someone murmured. "The bakery girl he married on a dare? She must be after his money," another voice sneered. Lila pretended not to hear, but her stomach tightened. Ethan guided her forward, his expression unreadable. He leaned down slightly. "Ignore them. You belong here as much as anyone." His tone was firm, but his grip softened just enough for her to feel it. Together they approached a circle of investors and board members. Ethan introduced her with smooth precision, but the air was sharp with hidden judgment. One of his ex-colleagues smirked. "Quite the surprise, Ethan. I did not take you for a romantic." Ethan's jaw flexed, but before he could reply, Lila stepped forward. "It is not about romance," she said with a calm smile. "It is about partnership. That is what strong companies and marriages are built on." The group fell silent. Then, unexpectedly, one woman clapped. "Well said, Mrs. Cole." Ethan's gaze lingered on her, a flicker of surprise crossing his usually composed face. For the first time that evening, his attention shifted entirely from the audience to the woman beside him. Hours later, when the event ended, they rode home in silence. The city lights streaked across the car windows. Lila held her purse tightly, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass. "Do they always look at you that way?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Ethan said after a pause. "They look, they judge, then they forget. That is the game." "But I am not playing," she whispered. He glanced at her, voice lower. "You just changed the rules." Back at the penthouse, Lila slipped off her heels and walked to the balcony. The night wind lifted her hair as she stared out at the skyline. Ethan joined her a moment later, his tie loosened. For a long time, neither spoke. The contract still bound them, but the silence between them was beginning to shift, less cold, more human. "You handled them well tonight," he said at last. "I have worked with customers my whole life," she replied. "People can be cruel when they think you are beneath them. You learn how to stay standing." Ethan studied her profile in the city light. Most people would have broken. Lila looked up at him, a faint smile on her lips. "Then they have never baked bread at 4 in the morning." "I mean," he laughed, quietly but genuinely. The sound startled them both. It was the first time Lila had heard warmth in his voice. When she went to bed that night, she caught her reflection in the mirror, the same face, the same woman, but somehow different. The world might still see a contract, a dare, a joke, but for the first time, she began to feel like someone rewriting her own story. Across the hall, Ethan stood by his window, watching the rain start again over the city. He thought of the way she had faced those people, the steadiness in her eyes. It unsettled him. For years, every deal had been predictable. But Lila Bennett was not a deal. She was a disruption he had not seen coming. The following week moved like a dream she could not wake from. Every morning began with fittings, meetings, and lessons in etiquette. Lila tried to memorize every rule the hired coach taught her: how to hold a glass, how to walk beside Ethan without drawing attention, how to smile without revealing doubt. Each step of her new life felt like walking on glass, yet she refused to let it cut her spirit. Ethan watched quietly from a distance. To the outside world, he remained cold and composed, the image of a man in control. But behind that stillness, something in him shifted. He had expected Lila to break, to crumble under the pressure of his world. Instead, she adapted, clumsy at first, then graceful in her own way. One afternoon, he entered the penthouse just as she was finishing a phone call with her bakery assistant. Her face lit up when she heard that her employees had managed to keep the shop open another week. When she hung up, she caught Ethan watching her. "What?" she asked, a hint of color rising to her cheeks. "Nothing," he said. "I just did not know that kind of joy could come from an oven." Lila laughed softly. "You should try it sometime. Baking makes people happy. That is more than money ever did." He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. "You sound like my grandmother. She used to say wealth without warmth is just cold metal." "Then maybe she was right," Lila said. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. It was not the awkward kind, but something gentler, charged with an emotion neither wanted to name. That Friday, the two attended a board dinner. It was supposed to be another performance, Ethan playing the charming husband, Lila the perfect partner. But midway through the night, a crisis erupted. One of the senior partners questioned Ethan's latest decision, hinting that his new wife might be an unwise distraction. The room grew tense. Ethan straightened in his seat, ready to shut the comment down. Before he could speak, Lila placed her hand lightly on his arm and stood up. "With all due respect," she said, her voice calm but steady, "the man you work for built his success long before I arrived. If you think a woman's presence can undo that, perhaps you underestimate his strength and mine." The table fell silent. Then slowly applause began from the opposite end. Ethan's jaw eased, pride flickering in his eyes. When the dinner ended, he opened the car door for her. "You did not have to defend me," he said as they drove away. "I did not do it for you," she answered. "I did it because no one should treat another person like they are a mistake." Ethan looked at her profile glowing under the city lights. "You really do not care what people think of you, do you?" "I used to," she said. "But then I realized their opinions do not pay the rent." He laughed, a real laugh this time, the sound echoing through the car. For once, it did not feel like an act. Later that night, as she stood on the balcony again, Ethan joined her, setting a light coat around her shoulders. The city below hummed with life, but up there it felt quiet, suspended. "You were remarkable tonight," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her voice softer than before. "You are starting to sound like you mean it." Their eyes met, and for the first time, neither looked away. The contract that had once felt like a wall between them now felt like a thin line waiting to be crossed. The next evening, the penthouse buzzed with last-minute preparations for the biggest event of the month, the Cole Foundation Charity Gala. Dozens of staff hurried through the hallways with flowers, table cards, and silver trays. For the first time, Lila was not the caterer but the guest of honor's wife. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the emerald gown chosen by the stylist. It shimmered softly against her skin, the color making her eyes glow. Ethan waited near the door, buttoning his cufflinks. When he saw her, he paused mid-motion. "You look incredible," he said quietly. "Thank you," she replied, unsure how to respond. "Let us hope I do not trip over the hem this time." "You will not," he said with certainty. "You have nothing left to prove." At the gala, photographers swarmed the red carpet. Lila's heart pounded as the flashes blinded her, but Ethan's steady hand at her back kept her grounded. Inside, the ballroom glittered even brighter than before, filled with reporters, donors, and socialites, eager to see the Dare marriage couple. A reporter approached almost immediately. "Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to go from bakery owner to the wife of one of the most eligible men in America?" Lila smiled, her voice calm. "It feels like any change worth making scary at first, but better when you work hard for it." The reporter seemed caught off guard by her composure. Ethan's expression softened with quiet pride. Halfway through the evening, the master of ceremonies announced the annual charity auction. Ethan stepped up to the podium to present a major donation. Lila remained near the front table, unaware that the spotlight was about to turn to her. "This year," Ethan said into the microphone, "our foundation will support local small businesses that survived hardship. And to begin that initiative, I would like to recognize someone who reminded me that integrity cannot be bought." Lila's head lifted in surprise as her name echoed across the hall. The room turned toward her. Cameras clicked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Lila Bennett Cole, your courage and determination inspired this program. Tonight, we begin with a grant that will fund 20 independent bakeries in our city." Applause erupted. Lila blinked rapidly, her heart caught between disbelief and gratitude. For a second, she forgot this was a contract. She saw only the man standing on the stage, someone who had begun to change. When the event ended, Ethan found her on the balcony behind the ballroom, looking out over the city lights. The sound of laughter drifted from inside, but out there it was quiet. "You did not tell me about the grant," she said. "I wanted it to be real," he answered. "Not just another line in a deal." Her eyes searched his. "And what about this?" she asked softly. "Is any of this real?" Ethan hesitated, the wind tugging at his tie. "I do not know," he said honestly. "But lately, it feels like it could be." Lila turned back toward the skyline, the glittering city mirrored in her eyes. For the first time since their strange beginning, she did not feel like an imposter in his world. Somewhere between the cameras and the applause, something unspoken had taken root, something neither contract nor pride could define. Inside, the music swelled again, and Ethan offered his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Cole," he said with a quiet smile. "Let us finish the night together." She hesitated only a moment before taking it. As they stepped back into the ballroom, the crowd's noise faded to a hum. All that remained was the warmth of his hand in hers, and the silent understanding that the game had changed forever. That night, long after the last guests had left the gala, the penthouse sat quiet except for the steady hum of city traffic below. Lila could still hear the echo of applause in her ears. She stood barefoot near the window, the emerald gown pooled around her feet, her heart still racing from the moment Ethan had spoken her name on stage. Ethan entered the room without a word, his bow tie undone, his expression softer than she had ever seen. For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was heavy, with things neither dared to speak. "You surprised me tonight," she said finally. "That grant, the speech, you did not have to do that." "I wanted to," he replied quietly. "You reminded me what purpose looks like. I had forgotten." Lila looked down, smiling faintly. "You make it sound like I changed your life." "Maybe you did," Ethan said, almost to himself. "Or maybe you just made me remember I still have one." She turned toward him, her pulse quickening. "Do you ever regret it? The dare? The deal? Any of this?" He met her eyes. "Every day," he said. "And yet, I would not undo it." For a moment, the city lights flickered across their faces, and the air between them felt charged. Lila stepped closer, her voice a whisper. "That sounds dangerously close to something real." Ethan smiled faintly. "Then maybe we are in danger." The space between them disappeared. They stood side by side, the sound of rain beginning to fall against the glass. He reached out carefully, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was hesitant, almost reverent. "You should rest," he said softly. "I cannot," she admitted. "My heart is too loud." He laughed quietly, but it was not mocking. It was the kind of laugh that comes from rediscovering something long lost. He took a step back, forcing himself to look away. "Good night, Lila." "Good night, Ethan," she whispered. Days turned into a rhythm that neither wanted to end. They attended events together, worked on the charity project, shared morning coffee in the quiet kitchen. What began as staged affection slowly blurred into something sincere. Ethan caught himself watching her when she spoke with passion about rebuilding small businesses. Lila found herself listening for his footsteps in the hallway, her heart betraying her with every sound. One afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled through the city, forcing them both to cancel their meetings. The power flickered, leaving only candlelight in the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, listening to the rain. "It is strange," Lila said. "For once I am not scared of the silence." Ethan nodded. "Because it is ours." She smiled at him, and for the first time, he reached for her hand without hesitation. No audience, no contract, just two people caught in a moment that felt inevitable. When the thunder faded and the world outside grew still, Ethan finally spoke. "You know, I used to think love was a weakness." "And now?" she asked softly. He looked down at their intertwined hands. "Now I think it might be the only thing that makes us strong." Lila said nothing, but the tears that filled her eyes said everything. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the city washed clean. Inside, two hearts that had started as strangers finally began to beat in the same rhythm. The calm that followed the storm did not last long. 3 days later, Ethan's world began to fracture. The morning news flashed headlines across every screen. "The Millionaire Marriage Dare exposed." Someone had leaked footage from the night of the original bet. Lila's face, startled and confused, appeared in the background of a grainy video, while Ethan's drunken friends shouted about the dare. The moment she saw it, her heart dropped. She had been setting out cupcakes for a charity meeting when her phone started buzzing with notifications. The words felt like knives: fake wife, gold digger, the bakery girl who sold herself for money. By the time Ethan returned home, reporters were already gathered outside the building. Cameras flashed as he pushed through them. "No comment," he said through clenched teeth. Inside the penthouse, Lila stood by the window, shaking. "Tell me it is not true," she said, her voice trembling. "Tell me it was not just a game." Ethan froze. He could see the pain in her eyes, and the truth he had buried for weeks clawed its way to the surface. "It started as one," he admitted. "But it is not anymore. Lila, I swear." She stepped back, her tears falling freely. "Do you know what it feels like to be laughed at by the whole city? To realize I was part of a joke?" "It was never meant to hurt you," he said, desperate now. "It was stupid, reckless. I was stupid. But everything after that first night was real." "Real?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "Contracts? Cameras? Pity? None of that was real, Ethan." She pulled off the wedding ring and placed it on the table. "I do not need your foundation or your charity. I just wanted to believe you saw me." Before he could stop her, she turned and walked out. The door closed with a soft click, and the sound hollowed the room. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the ring, glinting under the city light. For the next few days, the media storm grew worse. Old friends called to ask questions, investors demanded statements, and his publicist begged him to deny everything. Ethan refused. "I made this mess," he said. "I will not lie to clean it up." Meanwhile, Lila returned to her bakery, shutting the doors to everyone except her small staff. Customers whispered when she walked by. She ignored them, burying herself in work, baking until dawn just to stop thinking. One evening, as she was closing the shop, she found a letter slipped under the door. It was written in Ethan's handwriting. "I do not deserve your forgiveness, but the world should know the truth from me, not the tabloids. Tomorrow, I will tell them everything, not to save myself, but to set you free." The next day, every major network broadcasted Ethan's press conference. Cameras clicked as he stepped up to the podium, his voice steady but raw. "The video is real," he began. "The dare was real. But what happened afterward, what she gave me, was not a joke. It was grace." He paused, looking directly into the cameras. "If anyone deserves admiration, it is Lila Bennett. She is the only part of this story that was ever true." Lila watched from the back of her bakery, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt something stronger than humiliation. She felt seen. But whether forgiveness would follow, she did not yet know. The city outside hummed with noise, but inside, she stood in silence, holding the letter like a promise she was not ready to break. The press conference changed everything. Overnight, Ethan Cole went from being the arrogant millionaire to the man who publicly admitted his own disgrace. The media that once glorified his wealth now dissected every flaw. He stepped down from the board of his company and withdrew from public life, leaving behind the luxury that once defined him. For weeks, he disappeared from the spotlight completely. The penthouse stood dark, the glass windows reflecting nothing but the city's cold light. His friends tried to reach him, but Ethan ignored every call. For the first time in years, he lived without an assistant, without headlines, without applause. Only silence remained. Lila watched it all unfold from afar. Every morning, newspapers with his picture on the front page arrived at the bakery. She never bought them, but she always read the headlines. Ethan Cole sells mansion. Ethan Cole resigns. Ethan Cole donates millions to charity foundation. Each headline hit her like a quiet echo of something unresolved. One late afternoon, while sweeping the floor of Sweet Haven Bakery, she found a white envelope addressed to her. There was no return name, only the foundation's logo stamped in gold. Inside was a simple invitation: grand opening of the Second Chances program, dedicated to independent bakers across Chicago. The signature at the bottom read, "In honor of Lila Bennett." Her throat tightened. She hesitated, tracing her fingers over the embossed letters. After everything, he still used her name not for scandal but for gratitude. On the evening of the event, the city was painted in golden dusk. The new community kitchen stood in a renovated warehouse, glowing with soft lights and the smell of warm bread. Bakers from all over the city gathered, their laughter filling the air. Lila walked in quietly, unsure if she belonged there. And then she saw him. Ethan stood near the entrance, no longer in designer suits but in a simple charcoal jacket. He looked thinner, humbler, but his eyes carried a calm she had never seen before. When their gazes met, the room seemed to fade away. He approached slowly. "I did not know if you would come," he said. "I did not know either," she replied. He nodded. "This is your work, Lila. You inspired it. These people, these shops, they are standing because of you." "I am just a baker," she said softly. "No," he corrected. "You are the reason I became human again." Her eyes glistened. "Why did you name it Second Chances?" "Because you gave me mine." The words hung between them, fragile but sincere. Lila looked around at the smiling faces, at the trays of bread cooling on metal racks. For the first time since their scandal, she felt something healing inside her. Ethan handed her a folded piece of paper. It was the original contract, their marriage agreement. Across the top he had written, "Void." "You are free now," he said gently. "No more deals, no more signatures." Lila stared at the paper, then tore it cleanly in half. "I was already free," she said, "but thank you for catching up." A faint laugh escaped him, soft and unguarded. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the world quiet around them. Then he extended his hand. "Stay for the ribbon cutting?" She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. "Only if I get to cut it first." "Oh." As the ribbon fell and applause filled the air, Lila realized that forgiveness was not about forgetting. It was about choosing to see someone not for what they had done, but for who they had become. And in that moment, standing beside the man who had once broken her heart, she finally understood what second chances truly meant. 6 months later, spring returned to Chicago. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Sweet Haven Bakery was busier than ever, its glass windows glowing warm against the cool morning light. Lila moved behind the counter, dusting flour from her apron as customers lined up for her famous cinnamon rolls. The scandal that had once defined her name was now just a story people had stopped whispering about. What remained was her work, her laughter, and the quiet pride of a woman who had rebuilt her life with her own hands. That afternoon, she took a break outside, sitting on the small wooden bench she and her mother had built years ago. The street buzzed with life delivery trucks, laughter, the rhythm of ordinary days. She smiled to herself, thinking about how peace could grow out of chaos if you gave it enough time. A familiar shadow fell across the sidewalk. She looked up. Ethan stood a few feet away, holding a small box tied with a ribbon. He looked different now, simpler clothes, no entourage, just the calm of someone who had learned to live without masks. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she replied, unable to hide her smile. "It has been a while." "Too long," he admitted. He glanced at the bakery window where her name was painted in gold. "You kept the place alive." "You helped," she said. "Those grants changed a lot of lives." He shook his head. "You did that, not me. I just followed your recipe." "Zero." She laughed lightly, the sound easing the air between them. "And what brings you here, Mr. Cole? Looking for a croissant or redemption?" "Maybe both," he said, handing her the box. She untied the ribbon and opened it. Inside was the old silver ring she had left on his table months ago, but now it rested inside a heart-shaped cookie. Beneath it was a handwritten note. "No contracts. No bets. Only love if you will have me." Lila looked up, tears blurring her vision. "You kept it all this time?" "Every day," he said quietly. "I kept it to remind myself what I lost and what I hoped to earn back." The street noise faded around them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lila placed the ring back in his hand. "If this is another deal, I am not signing." "It is not," Ethan said, kneeling on the sidewalk without hesitation. "It is a promise, to be better, to choose you, every single day." The crowd that had gathered outside the bakery began to applaud softly, some recognizing who he was, others just smiling at the scene. Lila covered her mouth, overwhelmed. But when Ethan looked up at her with those steady gray eyes, she knew the man before her was no longer the one who made that cruel bet. He was the man who had fought to change. "Yes," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Yes, I will marry you this time for real." "No." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger as the bakery door chimed behind them, the scent of sugar and bread drifting into the street. Lila laughed through her tears, pulling him to his feet. "You still owe me one thing," she said. "What is that?" "A lifetime of helping wash the dishes." He smiled, his voice warm. "Deal." As they stood together under the afternoon sun, the world around them kept moving ordinary, imperfect, alive. And for the first time, the story that began as a dare ended not with pride or wealth, but with two people who had learned that love, when honest, was the most extraordinary thing money could never buy.